Picture standing in the open desert sun with no shade, no fabric lighter than burlap, and no ice for thousands of miles in any direction. Temperatures regularly climbed past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sun beat down on exposed sand and stone that could scorch bare feet in seconds. This wasn't a rare heat wave. This was an average Tuesday for the people who built one of the greatest civilizations in human history. No electricity, no refrigeration, no synthetic fabrics designed to wick away sweat, no weather apps warning of dangerous heat advisories before stepping outside. And yet ancient Egyptians didn't just survive the desert heat. They built pyramids in it, farmed in it, fought wars in it, and created an empire that lasted for 3,000 years, longer than the gap between the construction of the pyramids and today. How did a civilization with none of our modern tools figure out how to beat one of the most brutal climates on Earth, decade after decade, generation after generation, without the technology we now consider absolutely essential for survival? The answer involves clever architecture, surprising medical science, deadly mistakes that cost real lives, and a surprising number of people whose stories never made it into the history books at all. Let's step into the sand and find out exactly how they did it. Long before air conditioning existed, ancient Egyptian builders were already engineering their way around the heat using nothing but mud, stone, and a deep understanding of how buildings breathe. Homes were built with incredibly thick mud brick walls, sometimes over a foot thick, which acted as natural insulation. During the day, those thick walls slowly absorbed the punishing heat instead of letting it flood inside. And at night, when desert temperatures dropped dramatically, the stored heat radiated back out, keeping the home's interior temperature far more stable than the wild swings happening outside. Windows were small and placed high on the walls, limiting direct sunlight while still allowing hot air to escape upward, since heat naturally rises. Ceilings were kept intentionally high for the exact same reason, giving hot air somewhere to go besides directly onto the people living below. Wealthier homes even built windcatchers, tall chimney-like structures on the roof designed to funnel cooler breezes down into the living space. It was HVAC technology thousands of years before anyone coined the term. Here's a detail most people miss when they imagine ancient Egypt. The pyramids weren't always the sandy, weathered brown color we see in photographs today. When they were originally built, the Great Pyramid of Giza and many other major structures were covered in polished white limestone casing stones, and that color choice wasn't just about looking impressive. White surfaces reflect sunlight instead of absorbing it, which meant these massive structures stayed noticeably cooler than they would have if built from darker material. Modern science backs this up completely. Light-colored surfaces can run 20 to 30 degrees cooler than dark ones under direct desert sun. Egyptian builders may not have understood the physics of solar reflectance the way we do today, but through centuries of trial and observation, they landed on a building method that kept temples and monuments from turning into literal ovens. Even their clothing followed the exact same logic. Linen, the fabric of choice across ancient Egyptian society, was almost always left in its natural light color, lightweight, breathable, and loosely woven to maximize airflow against the skin. The Nile River wasn't just Egypt's water source. It was quite literally the only reason large-scale civilization could exist in the desert at all. But beyond drinking water and irrigation, ancient Egyptians developed a surprisingly advanced form of evaporative cooling using nothing but water, air movement, and porous materials. Servants would often hang large wetted mats or cloths across doorways and open windows. As hot desert air passed through the damp material, the evaporation process pulled heat out of the air, creating a primitive but genuinely effective air conditioning system. The same basic principle modern swamp coolers still use today. Wealthy households sometimes employed servants whose entire job was fanning the air across pools of water or wet linens, manually accelerating the cooling effect for their employers. Even something as simple as sleeping on a rooftop at night, a common practice across ancient Egypt, took advantage of physics, since heat radiates upward and rooftops caught whatever breeze existed after the desert floor had baked all day. Not everyone got to enjoy clever architecture and cooling servants. The laborers who built Egypt's greatest monuments faced brutal, sometimes fatal, exposure to the heat on a daily basis, often for months at a stretch during the annual flooding season, when farming was impossible and thousands of workers were redirected toward massive state construction projects instead. Archaeological evidence from worker villages near the pyramids at Giza reveals skeletal remains showing signs consistent with severe physical strain, dehydration, and heat-related illness, along with spinal damage from years of hauling multi-ton limestone blocks across open desert under a merciless sun. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, remarkably, actually describe symptoms that modern doctors would immediately recognize as heat stroke, confusion, fever, and collapse, even though the Egyptians had no concept of what was happening internally within the human body, no understanding of core temperature or dehydration at a cellular level. Workers were organized into rotating shift systems, and evidence suggests labor was deliberately scheduled around the punishing midday sun, with major physical work concentrated into early morning and late afternoon hours instead, while the most brutal midday stretch was reserved for rest, food, and shade whenever possible. But rotating shifts and clever scheduling couldn't save everyone. Heat stroke was almost certainly a leading cause of death among outdoor laborers, quietly killing workers whose names never made it into any historical record at all, buried in simple graves near the very monuments they gave their lives constructing. Ancient Egyptian physicians developed treatments for heat-related illness that were centuries ahead of their time, even without understanding germ theory or basic thermoregulation. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts ever discovered, includes detailed instructions for treating fever and heat exhaustion using cooling compresses, herbal remedies, and rest in shaded, ventilated spaces. Egyptian doctors also strongly recommended frequent water consumption and even prescribed early versions of what we now call electrolyte replacement, mixtures involving natural salts and mineral-rich water, to combat the effects of severe dehydration. Priests, who often doubled as the era's most skilled physicians, believed illness stemmed from spiritual imbalance as much as physical causes, so treatment frequently combined practical medical remedies with prayers and protective rituals aimed at the sun god Ra himself, the very deity believed to control the punishing heat in the first place. Long before Spain popularized the concept, ancient Egyptians had already figured out that working through the hottest hours of the day was a recipe for disaster. Daily life across ancient Egypt was structured around the sun's brutal midday peak. Markets, government offices, and even construction work slowed dramatically or paused entirely during the hottest stretch of afternoon, typically resuming again once temperatures began dropping in the early evening. This wasn't laziness. It was survival wisdom baked directly into the culture's daily rhythm. Evening became the primary social period across Egyptian society. When families gathered, meals were eaten, and business was conducted in the cooler, more bearable hours after sunset. Even religious festivals and major public gatherings were frequently scheduled around sunrise or sunset, specifically to avoid subjecting large crowds to dangerous peak heat exposure. Ancient Egyptians consumed an enormous amount of beer, and while it's tempting to assume this was purely recreational, the truth is more practical than you'd expect. Egyptian beer was thick, nutrient-dense, relatively low in alcohol content, and was consumed by adults and children alike as a genuine dietary staple rather than primarily as an intoxicant. Because the brewing process involved boiling water, beer was frequently safer to drink than untreated water sources that could carry dangerous bacteria, making it an important hydration source in a civilization without any concept of water purification. Diet also played a significant supporting role in heat survival. Ancient Egyptians consumed large quantities of water-rich fruits and vegetables, including melons, cucumbers, and onions, foods that provided hydration support alongside essential nutrients and salt replacement, helping offset what was lost through constant sweating in extreme desert conditions. Egyptian fashion is often remembered today for its striking visual style, but nearly every clothing choice served a direct practical purpose against the heat. Linen was lightweight, breathable, and reflected sunlight far more effectively than heavier or darker fabrics could ever manage. Both men and women commonly shaved their heads entirely, then wore wigs made from human hair or plant fiber, a practice that dramatically reduced heat retention compared to a full head of natural hair exposed directly to relentless desert sun. Thick black coal eyeliner, worn by both men and women across every social class, wasn't purely cosmetic decoration. Modern research suggests coal may have actually helped reduce sunlight glare, similar to the black grease modern athletes still smear beneath their eyes today. Jewelry and headdresses, while symbols of status and wealth, frequently doubled as functional sun protection, shielding delicate skin around the eyes, neck, and shoulders from prolonged, punishing sun exposure throughout the day. Ancient Egypt didn't survive the desert by accident. It survived through thousands of years of careful architectural design, genuine early medical science, thoughtful daily scheduling, and clothing choices that blended fashion with practical function. Every clever adaptation we've covered today, from reflective white limestone to evaporative cooling mats to salt-rich hydration formulas, represents centuries of trial, observation, and hard-won experience passed down through countless generations. But it's also worth remembering the laborers who paid the ultimate price building the monuments we still marvel at today, the workers heat stroke quietly killed, whose names history never bothered to record at all. Next time you complain about a hot summer day with air conditioning just a button press away, remember there was once an entire civilization that built pyramids in that same brutal heat, using nothing but mudbrick, linen, and sheer human ingenuity. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient Egyptian survival, make sure to subscribe for more buried and forgotten stories from history. See you in the next one.